What's up, everyone? This week on the pod, it is Steve Larson of Insted. But before we get started, going to do another Fred Hammer giveaway. The new Annihilation Time CD is out, or it's a repress of the first CD, the first LP that Fred sang on. So get at me. The first two people that email me at 185milessouth@gmail.com. Let me know you want that CD, and Fred's going to hook you up. Domestic only. I apologize to the fans of the pod in Europe, especially the Crystal Palace supporters in England, and my boys in Sweden. But yeah, so hit me up, 185milessouth@gmail.com. First two get that Annihilation Time CD, and you're fucking stoked. Now, please support the pod. You got to subscribe to it wherever you listen to it, and share with your buddies, repost it on social media, whatever you can do to get the word out. That is much appreciated. If you want to go the extra mile, you can go to patreon.com/185milessouth and become a Patreon. You can toss down $1 a month, gets you behind the paywall, or if you can do more and support, that is much appreciated. Trying to do a Patreon podcast for basically every interview. So, I'll interview Steve on this week's pod, and in 5 days, 4 or 5 days, there'll be a Patreon podcast coming out where I'll have some buddies on. We'll discuss the pod. We'll discuss the discography of whoever I interviewed. And it's a good time. In fact, some of those pods we've done, some of the Patreon ones, I think they're the best stuff we've done. Especially like the Hartsfield one, the Mandel one, et cetera, et cetera. But let's get on with the pod.
185 Miles South, a hardcore punk rock podcast.
What's up, everyone? This week on the pod, it is Steve Larson of the legendary band Insted. How you doing, Steve?
I'm doing good, Zach. How are you?
I'm doing great. Thanks so much for taking the time to do this.
Oh, it's my pleasure.
Cool. Let's jump right in. And do you remember how you got into punk and hardcore?
Yeah. I mean, I think it's pretty typical of most people's stories. I had an older friend who was probably he was 2 years older than me, maybe 3. But he's kind of a nihilistic type of dude. And, he introduced me to like GBH and Dead Kennedys and punk and English punk. And from there it just grew, I started recording a radio show that's local in Orange County, Los Angeles, called Rodney on the Rock. And Rodney on the Rock really gets more credit than anyone else besides my friend Neil, in that he really was bringing a lot of underground punk and hardcore and playing it regularly on the weekends on KROQ. So, that's where I first heard Youth Brigade. That's where I first heard Minor Threat, Bad Brains, things like that. That's when I transitioned into American hardcore from American punk and English punk.
Yeah, I wish I could have heard Clean Cut American Kid for the first time on Rodney on the Rock.
Yeah, that's the first time I heard it. I don't think for a second I didn't go out and buy it.
Yeah, it's so cool. That comp is wild too, because it's like part punk and then part, I don't know how to describe the other stuff. I'm pretty narrow minded, I guess, on my musical taste in the guitar format.
Yeah, I mean, it was definitely eclectic, but it was really important, especially at that time, I think.
Yeah, so is that like 83, 84 when you're getting into this stuff?
Yeah, probably maybe like even 82 a little bit. I'm putting my toe in the water. I don't really know, what's happening to me, for lack of a better term, but he's basically just laying all these bands on me. And my parents weren't fairly young. They were young when they had me. They were 20 years old. And my parents were really into music. They were record collectors, but they were into, 60s and 70s rock, So, like, I remember waiting in line at Licorice Pizza with my dad to pick up, one of the Led Zeppelin releases on the day it came out. So, that kind of thing was already normal in my house. Loud music going all the time. It was just loud classic rock. You know what I mean? But for me, even with classic rock, some of it being kind of rowdy, it was nothing compared to hearing, the Dead Kennedys, Nazi punk, fuck off, and looking back at getting into it, like the lyrics, the nihilism didn't appeal to me necessarily, but the sound and energy and emotions of it did. Does that make sense? What I'm saying? I think it does.
Yeah, absolutely.
But,
I mean, it's kind of the birth of hardcore, right? Like
right.
the difference between like the punk and the hardcore.
Right, exactly. And so while I love all those things I just laid out, the sound, the energy, the emotions that I heard, and I wasn't, politically advanced at, 12, 13 years old, but I was like, wow, this is for me, And so I started gravitating, towards exclusively listening to stuff like that. And my parents were really cool, which is, it usually cuts one way or the other. Like, parents are really against it and afraid of it, for lack of a better term, or they support their kid. And since my parents were into music and some of that stuff was cutting edge when they were coming up, some of that classic rock, they understood and they let me be. They never told me like, this is satanic or this is, whatever. They just let me be and let me keep discovering.
Sure. How long after you start listening to music do you go to a show? And do you go with like your older friend?
So yeah, that's kind of let's see. You have to excuse me at 51. Some of these memories, like blend into one memory, when it's actually not true. So as I'm sitting here going through this with you, I'm going to be sorting through my own recollection. So what I can say is flatly, my friend Neil, he listened to punk, but he wasn't active in the scene in any way, shape, or form. So he didn't live in my neighborhood. His grandparents did, so I would see him like every other week or something like that, and for Saturday and part of Sunday, and so I had a lot of time to myself. And what I started doing was just kind of branching out on my own, and getting deeper and deeper into it than he was even. And so I actually didn't go to any shows until I was a sophomore in high school. I think maybe a freshman, but definitely a sophomore in high school. Just got to ride Defenders or Flashdance. I don't even remember what my first show was, to be honest with you, because it just seemed like at that point in my life, I was just constantly listening to punk and hardcore and ska, and I always had eclectic taste in music, and maybe eclectic isn't the right word. I liked early ska. I liked classic rock. Shamelessly. I loved punk and hardcore, but I really, I used to get made fun of a lot because I was really into what they called at the time college rock. Like I would get REM records, and I would get, I don't know, fill in the blank with any college radio band at the time, in the early 80s. People are like, what are you listening to? But, anyways, I wish I could share with you what that first show was, but I really don't recall what it was. I can say some of the earliest shows I saw were Uniform Choice just before Screaming for Change came out.
Jesus, what was that like?
Oh my God, dude. So let me, I hate, going all over the place, but unfortunately it's going to need to work that way because you're going to jog different memories for me. So at some point on Rodney on the Rock, I hear Minor Threat. I am from a lower middle class family with a lot of drug and alcohol problems, on both sides, my mom's side and my dad's side. Everybody around me was just, I felt like I was constantly surrounded by parties. Like, people at our house, us going to someone else's house. Again, my parents were young, right? Um, and, I was just seeing all these people bottom out around me. And to be honest and perfectly transparent, I was going that route too at a very early age, probably 12 years old. It was the first time I was drunk, you know? And I didn't like it. I didn't like where I was going, but until I heard Minor Threat and was like, that really, and I've heard this a lot on your podcast, but it changed everything for me. Because then I was like, wait a minute, there's other people that feel like I feel. This is amazing. Now, hardcore's taken on a whole new perspective for me. Now I'm not, just listening to nihilistic political lyrics. I'm listening to suburban kids who are pissed off about everybody being drunken, drugged out buffoons around them. So going back to what you were asking originally, Uniform Choice, man, I never got to see Minor Threat live. Let's get that out of the way. But Uniform Choice was a life-changing experience in itself as well. Pat Dubar was like a big brother to all the straight edge kids, or the kids that weren't down with all the nastiness that permeated our Orange County and LA shows. And the guy took shit from no one. And just watching the energy of that, when they were still fresh, it was, I was just like, how do I get more involved in this? This is where I need to be at all times.
Yeah, I mean, it has to be the closest thing to seeing Minor Threat, seeing UC in their prime.
Yeah,
I mean,
watching videos of Minor Threat, I can only imagine, or early Bad Brains, how mind blowing that would be. And I feel maybe it'd be a little reckless to say, that it compares, because you're talking about, quite a few years earlier, and hearing sounds like that for the first time, must have been, I can't even imagine what that was like. I can tell you what the experience of seeing Uniform Choice was like. And,
but if you're
back then,
but if you're connecting to if you're connecting to the Minor Threat records like that, then I think, and you miss them, I think the closest thing is the UC, because of the aggression of the music plus the message is similar.
Absolutely. And Dubar was a smart guy, and he was also a physically fit jock, and I don't want to label him a jock, because, jock has bad connotation, but he was a good, and dare I say, elite athlete. And so you got some guy up there in plaid pegged pants and Van skater shoes, shirtless, head shaved. He was fucking pissed off, man. And I felt safe, and I felt like this is my tribe. And I was all in after I saw them the first time. Was 7 Seconds with them that night I saw them? I don't know. I don't know if it's one show or two shows, but I definitely saw, if not the same night, close nights together, 7 Seconds, before the Crew, and Uniform Choice right before Screaming for Change came out. And those two events changed me forever.
Yeah, I mean, I believe it, because I think that Insted is the closest to 7 Seconds.
But thanks. That's really nice of you to say.
But we'll get there. Can you talk a little bit about, you refer to like the nastiness in the scene. Can you elaborate on that for us that didn't come around until the 90s?
Yeah. So, I mean, I'll use a place like Fender's Ballroom is where I could probably draw the most for that answer. A little bit of the Country Club, you saw a little nastiness there. But, when you go to Fender's was a big, I want to say it was at least 1,000 people, probably more like 1,500 that they jam into that. It was a big, wide venue, just like a banquet hall. And hence Fender's Ballroom, right? So it was just like, number one, it was in a terrible neighborhood in Long Beach, and I don't know that my parents would have been cool with me going where I was going had they actually known. It probably was allowed to happen because they liked my friends, and my parents were. It was a different era too, like parents didn't. This is going to sound wrong, but they didn't know as much as we know now about the dangers of places and how in how much you can keep track of your kids now. And I'm speaking from experience, having 3 children myself. But it was, there was the Lads, there was Circle One, there was the Mickey Mouse Club, and I'm sure I'm forgetting others. But it was purely, I'm sure some of those guys were there for the music, but a lot of them were there for the chaos and the potential violence. And I clearly remember seeing, I think it was GBH at Fender's. Those bills were so eclectic back then, and I really miss how we got away from that later on in the '80s. But that's another question or another part of the story. But I clearly remember, being at the edge of the pit, up towards the front of the stage, and I could literally, as loud, as ear blistering as it was, I could literally hear the sounds of fists hitting faces, boots hitting heads, ribs. Like it was nasty, man. So, it was really no different than the streets. And again, I was lower middle class, probably closer to lower class than middle class. I grew up in a poor neighborhood, and there was a lot of violence in my neighborhood. And so for me, it wasn't so bad because I learned how to function in gang areas, in that, like just the acknowledgement of somebody or a group of people in a gang when you're walking by without making too much eye contact, without looking like a victim. Those things pay off, and those are things that if you're not in those areas, you don't even think about, So for me, Fenders was a lot the same as my neighborhood with, GDH or Fang or Dr. No as a backdrop to violence. You know what I mean?
Yeah, absolutely. It's your neighborhood with a sick soundtrack.
Yeah, exactly. A way better soundtrack than my neighborhood.
Yeah. No,
I mean, unless you're into oldies, I mean, those are cool.
It is. No, but I mean, it makes sense to connect with a band like Uniform Choice where you feel safe, right? If you're getting fucked with, like the singer might fuck that guy up.
Oh yeah, for sure. But Pat would be off the stage. He would be on the mic, just fearless, absolutely fearless. And then it just became like as Straight Edge in Orange County in LA grew and grew and grew, it just became like, strength in numbers, to be honest with you.
Yeah. So when do you decide to not just be a showgoer and you want to start participating? Have you played drums for a long time, or did you start playing drums to be in a punk band?
Yeah. So, okay. So let me back into this as well. So when I was like 10 years old, we were at a party at one of my parents' friend's house, and I went to go use the restroom, and I went in the wrong door, and there was this sparkle blue Ludwig kit in the room that I walked in, and it was literally like, the scene where they pull where the guy sees the Ark in Raiders of the Lost Ark. like that's what it was. I was just standing in the doorway like, oh my God, how do I get one of these? Yeah. And I knew what it was, but I can tell you at 10 years old, instantly, I knew that I wanted to play drums right then and there. And, and so I held on to that thought. And when it was time to go into junior high, I wanted to sign up for band because I wanted to learn how to play drum set, and my parents didn't have the means to get me lessons. And so it was an opportunity to go after it. And my goal, honestly, was to play well enough to play in a band. When I first had this thought, it wasn't about punk bands. And then eventually it became, I want to be good enough to be in a punk band. Right. So, Yeah, I mean, I didn't know going into junior high was, well, they don't teach you drum set right out. You got to learn how to hold your sticks. You've got to learn how to play the snare drum. You got to learn how to play the the marching bass.
Yeah, and
Things like that.
you get stuck on the kettle drums.
Right, exactly. Things like that. Yeah, you're talking about concert band, and stuff like that. And so then, I wrote it out. I knew that being in the band, the school band at the time was a mark of the squealer. It was like just you're a band geek. You're marked. The
Yeah.
thing for me too is I was an athlete as well. So I had this weird at that time, and this may sound absolutely ridiculous in this day and age, but at that time, people didn't do sports and bands. Just very, very few people did. And I can say that while I did it, I didn't know anybody who did through junior high and into high school. So I was willing to take any criticism, which I got very little of because it turns out like just people were cool with me in general. So I that probably made it easier to stick with it too, to be honest. But I stuck with it. I got a little bit of introduction to drum kit, and then going into high school, all the drumline guys really took me in, and that was a whole different vibe. Like going into high school marching band, and I was playing football and playing baseball. But in high school in the summer, you're basically training like you train for football season. So I was bouncing, like I'd go to band camp in the summer, and I would leave there for a little while, go do my hell week for football. The days of the hell week were like almost in direct alignment, and then come back to band camp, beat the shit, sweaty, whatever, and it was just a means to an end for me, and I got to know some guys. I got to know more about drum kit. I, knew how to read music enough. Everything was coming together as planned. And then eventually I somehow got my parents to agree to buy a drum set that they probably couldn't afford. And at that point, where I lived in a very small, like craftsman bungalow in Anaheim, and it was literally like a 800 square foot house, but it was just me and my parents. And but it was like on a big piece of land, So the garage was a 2-car garage, and it was like way away from the house and back, and there was like it backed up to an alley. So like I could go out there, set up my drums. I like soundproof walls, put up mattresses, egg crate, anything I could find, and just started putting on headphones and playing along to whatever I could, and I was playing along to Fear the Record. I was playing along to Mommy's Little Monster, 1942, Social Distortion as well. So that's kind of, did I answer the question, or I get way off base here? I've lost myself.
No, that was more than I could have asked for. That was awesome.
Right. All right. Cool, man. Thanks.
Yeah. So how do you, is Insted your first band?
Well, yes. I mean, besides doing like a punk cover band that, in high school, like at pep rallies and backyard parties and stuff, literally covering like, English dog songs and, doggy style songs. And that, so what happened is, specifically when we would do the doggy style song, we would do Donut Shop Rock, and then Kevin Hernandez, the singer of Insted, would grab the mic, and then the place would go apeshit because we were doing like backyard parties. Backyard parties were really big in the mid '80s, early '80s, mid '80s. They're just, somebody would get a couple of kegs, charge $5, have us in the backyard as entertainment. People would do what they thought was punk and pit, get wasted, get high. And then, like I said, eventually Kevin started doing Donut Shop Rock with us. And then it was like, wait a minute, this guy is actually a good front man. And people were into it, like our friends. We had a group of friends in high school that were into punk. Like my school was largely Hispanic, and I would say probably, I'm guessing at the time, probably 70% Hispanic. 20% white, 10%, mix of Asian, black, whatever, right? So all the white kids at Anaheim High School were into surfing, skateboarding, hardcore, or metal. Like that's what everybody did, you know? So we were getting a lot of support, even though it was probably only a handful of people looking back. And it was fun too. Like it was fun. Like when Kevin would grab the mic, it was more fun than when the singer of our little cover band was singing, right? Everybody got super excited. So, it basically that band evolved into Insted and writing original music, to answer your question.
And how does that feel to start writing original music, and who's the catalyst to that?
I had a lot to do with that. Basically Kevin was 2 grades ahead of me. One of the original guitar players, Bill McLaughlin, was a year ahead of me, maybe 2 years ahead of me as well. And there was his brother Tom, who was in my grade. Tony Garcia was in my grade. So that was it, right? And Kevin was like this punk rock weirdo at our school, like bondage pants, docs. Like he was punk as fuck, And I remember, like, he used to embarrass me. Like, I'd be sitting on the bench outside the locker room, like, just putting on my cleats and whatnot, getting ready for football practice, and he'd roll up in his full painted leather with spikes on it and bondage pants and socks, and he always wore a fisherman's hat, and he would just come sit down next to me and like put his arm on my shoulder and be like, "What's up, Larry?" He used to call me Larry instead of everybody called me Larson. He called me Larry. To this day, he called me Larry. And he's like, basically just trying to sell me on the idea, like, we should just do this, And so I don't even remember if we had a discussion with the guy who was singing in our cover band, because essentially, like I said, all we did was swap singers. And then we had a half pipe in the backyard of the McLaughlin brothers garage where we rehearsed. And that half pipe got us some notoriety as well. Like these guys would love to come, skate. Like it was just like a 4-foot half pipe, so like a mini, But guys, like big time guys, came and skated that ramp, and big time skaters at that time, pros, and it was cool for them. We were in the garage making music. It all seemed normal. All those things went together. But going back to your question, it was just a natural evolution, and that's the best way I could describe it. It was an evolution into what we did. And I was really into, even though I didn't know how to play guitar, I understood things like song structure and whatnot. So I had a lot of ideas that I was able to say mouth mimic to our guitar player. Like I remember distinctly Live and Let Live, telling him, yeah, I want to do something like da-na, ticka, ticka, da-na, ticka, ticka, da-na, and it became a big part of a big song for us, So, again, in a nutshell, it was just natural evolution.
Yeah, you're speaking my language with the mouth mimicking. I still have to do it to our guitarist. But,
right.
And I played guitar in a band forever, but I'm not good enough to write the songs that we have. So
right.
We got a mouth mimic. So you do a demo in 1986.
Correct.
Where do you record this? And how does it feel to like come out of doing something and being able to listen to yourself?
So none of us had any recording experience whatsoever. We went somewhere in Long Beach. I really don't remember where we recorded it, but it was just like a little 8-track, half-inch 8-track studio. Nothing fancy, like some guy that kind of knew what he was doing, but not really. And I don't remember how we got hooked up with him or anything. All that is lost on me. I feel like it was in a basement somewhere, and that's weird too, because there's not a lot of basements in Southern California. But we recorded with this guy, and it was a weird process. It was a learning. We were all learning as we were going. But I think, if I remember right, on on the demo, we still recorded it all live. We didn't really overtrack anything. Maybe vocals got overtracked. Because I can say when we went to go do Bonds of Friendship, I still did not understand multi-tracking completely by the time we entered the studio.
Yeah. Do you do shows before the demo? Like, are you playing? Is it mostly just backyard, or are you playing actual?
Yeah, we're
clubs now?
we're just doing backyard parties at this point. I think the demo's out before we play our first club show, which was at Big John's in Anaheim.
Okay. And can you describe that club? What was it like?
It was just a pool hall, and like I don't want to say it was a biker bar because it wasn't quite a biker bar, but it was a dirty, seedy pool hall, right next to some railroad tracks. And strangely, I am walking distance. So I work walking distance away from where the club used to be, but it was a big deal. They had a stage, they had a PA, and yeah, somebody just recently sent me the flyer for that show, like in a text, like, "Hey, check this out," and I was like, "Damn."
So cool. But it was all ages, and your friends were able to go.
It was all ages, even though they had a bar in there. I don't remember how they separated that out because I know it wasn't, like the traditional big black X on the hand or anything like that. But yeah, they were definitely able to go in.
Yeah. And so, what was that like playing your first show?
Well, it was, God, such a mix of emotions. You're nervous, you're excited, you're grateful. I mean, Doggy Style is, was it Doggy Style? I think Doggy Style. Yeah, Doggy Style was our first show, our first club show. And Kevin was friends with Brad Xavier and Lou, the drummer. They all played in like a men's basketball league somewhere. They all knew each other from, playground, pickup hoop games and stuff like that. And, we all loved Doggy Style too. They were Fullerton or Placentia, and we were Anaheim boys. And there's a lot of good punk came out of that area, before us. When you're thinking about Huntington Beach, and just Orange County had a lot of good punk that came out of it. Fullerton in particular. So yeah, I mean, it was a mix of emotions, but I had been playing in marching band. I played football, like I was used to being in front of an audience, so for me personally, I was more excited than anything else. That was the thing I felt most. I was excited to be doing it.
Is there a lot of friends there? Like, do you get a good, like, typical reaction, or what is it?
So it's a small show. Doggy Style is coming towards the tail end of like their popularity. They were never huge, but they, and of course we were an opener, and I think there was a band. I think we were the opener, and there was a band in between us, and then Doggy Style. But I mean, we were well received for the let's just say, I don't remember if there was 30 people there or 75, but the small amount of people reacted well to us.
Yeah. And then what are these years like in between the demo and then recording Bonds of Friendship? Do you play a lot locally, and do you start to build up like a fan base?
Yeah. A small fan base. We're like doing parties with half off and yeah, just doing some small club shows. And then I think we did another show at Big John's with Final Conflict. Ron Martinez was always really, really cool to us. He's still a cool guy. I love Ron Martinez. So, and Final Conflict, again, a band that we grew up, dare I say idolizing, but, it was a big deal to us, you're now like, I've transitioned now from being a fan to being part of something, and I'm still a pen pal with people all over the United States and in Europe, and I'm still just exchanging letters and putting wax on stamps so people can reuse them, and trading calling card numbers because that was a big deal for a while, so we could all talk to each other. We'd send each other calling card numbers, and you'd get free long distance. Buying records, I did most of my record buying locally, but I would trade stuff in the mail. So I'm just completely immersed in hardcore, like in hardcore and punk. Just I feel like I'm going to shows a few nights a week. If I'm not at football or baseball practice or playing a game, I'm at a show or I'm practicing on my own or I'm practicing with Insted. Like it's just nonstop. I'm in constant motion doing one of those things.
Yeah, real quick as a sidebar, do you think that Final Conflict is one of the most underrated bands of all time?
Absolutely.
Because, Jesus, they've ripped for so long and they still rip.
Yeah, I agree. 100%. Definitely underrated.
Yeah. Another little just sidebar before we get to the LP.
Sure.
There's a demo bootleg that comes out, but it doesn't appear to be the same like track listing as the demo. Do you know what that is? The Will Be Remembered?
Yeah, you know what? So I think somebody sent me one and I've never put it on the turntable. It sounds terrible, I know. I'm not somebody who enjoys listening to my own music. But what can you tell me about it? I don't remember much about it. I remember seeing it, but I don't remember much about it.
I can pull up the track listing, and I was
trying
to figure out exactly what it was. Track listing. It's up to you, your choice. Never Last, Untitled, Proud Youth, Keep the Faith, and Don't Give Up.
So somebody's obviously like just taken lyrics from songs and tried to make them song titles is I think what's happening, right?
It might just be the demo and they titled everything wrong.
It could be. Did you say is Keep Right on there?
One more time. Let's see here. Shout out discogs.com. It's not listed. Not listed.
Okay.
Keep the Faith is listed.
Yeah, so that ended up being Faith on Bonds, right?
Right. Yeah, so I didn't know if there was a second demo. I guess that was my question.
No, there's one demo.
Okay, cool. So going in, you record Bonds of Friendship, and this is an iconic LP. I mean, partially for the style. It comes out in 1988. The LP cover is iconic as you can get, and this thing's fucking awesome. Can you talk about going in to record it?
Well, yeah. I mean, I really appreciate the kind words. We have different views of it. I'll tell you that much. Sorry.
It's all good. Life calls.
Yeah, exactly. I'm trying to kill it right now. Anyways, so where would you like me to start? The cover?
Yeah, and I don't have it pulled up, but the cover is very similar to like is it Mike Gibbs? Something like that? Are you gonna go there? The cover is exactly like okay. It's exactly like a jazz record.
Yeah, I've seen that, and I don't know anything about it that other than somebody sent me that cover, right? Mm-hmm. That predated Bonds of Friendship, right?
Right.
What happened to me was I would get shuttled off to my grandmother on my father's side when my parents were, needed a babysitter, and she wasn't a very maternal person, unfortunately. But like if I wanted to go, so what would happen is she would just put me in front of the TV, and like Lawrence Welk show would be on the entire time, and I'd be like, this sucks. So what she did have was an epic collection of National Geographic magazines and Life magazines, like just decades of them. And so I would sit there and just go through those magazines and look at photos. So when we were working on the demo somewhere around that time, I remembered a photo that I had seen in one of her Life magazines, and it was the photo of those three kids from Bonds of Friendship, right? So I went and got it, and then my cousin was a pretty good artist, and I asked him, look, I don't know how to get hold of this photographer. I actually think he's dead, and I think it would also just be cooler if you could draw it like in pencil. And he's like, yeah, I could do that. And so he did that. And he's the same guy who also drew Chet from the back of the Insted shirts. I don't know if you know who Chet is, but the Instead shirt with the guy breaking through the Instead. That's Chet to us.
Yeah, iconic.
So thanks. So I had a lot to do with Instead's art, not because I'm an artist, but I was definitely into graphics, and I think I had a fairly good eye for those kind of things. So like Chet was my idea. Having him break through the Instead was my idea. And I'm not trying to take credit for it. It just, I had a lot to do with what Instead looked like from a graphic standpoint. In fact, the way Instead is written is I got that from a guy named John White, who was going to school in Florida, who I was pen pals with, and he was booking shows, hardcore guy. I think he's in Seattle now. Last time I saw him was at John Bunch's memorial. I came down for that, but I've known that guy since probably 85, 86, via pen pal. But anyways, so that's where the cover concept came from. And the photo in Life magazine was actually called Bonds of Friendship. So I hijacked the whole thing shamelessly. Cause I loved it. It had impact on me. And, I think it had impact on a lot of other people as well. And I'm happy about that. So then, I'm going back to this, I'm going to back up a little bit. Sorry. As I go back to this Big John shows, I think I have it backwards. I think we played with Final Conflict first and then Doggy Style. And at the Doggy Style show, Brad had invited Pat and Pat, Dubar and Longry, from Uniform Choice to come see it. He's like, I think you need to see these guys. I think you guys are going to dig them. And so we actually basically got a record deal from our second club show with Wishing Well. And I say record deal loosely, like it was just, it wasn't like some big deal, you know what I mean? But anyways, they're working on Staring Into the Sun, right? And we wanted to record with Chaz at Casbah Studios, but they wanted us to go into where they were recording Staring Into the Sun because they had established a relationship with this guy Rich Andrews, who was running that studio. So, we didn't know enough about recording to say anything about it. We were just like, okay, and that's what we went and did. We paid for the recording out of our pocket. It took a long time to come out. It took probably over 2 years to come out, because I think we recorded it in '86 and it came out in '88.
Holy cow.
Yeah, it was. I'm not gonna lie. I love Pat Dubar and Pat Longry. They've always been good to me, but it was super disappointing. And they were having some issues because they had made some deal with Giant Records and they weren't getting paid. And, there was a whole thing going on there that I didn't really understand at the time. But anyways, so we go into Radio Tokyo and we record Bonds of Friendship, and super green, super naive. Knowing what I know now, I would have done it totally different. But there's people like you who really love that record, and I love the record because it represents a time in my life that was fantastic. I'm a junior in high school and I'm making an album, and I don't regret it. I wish I knew more, because I would have put my foot down and said, no, we're recording with Chaz at Casbah. That's what we're doing.
So you just don't like how the recording came out?
I don't. At the time, studios with a lot of carpet on the walls and ceilings and just being absolutely dead. And I don't know what your background is in recording. It was just everything was very dry. And then there was, that record sounds like the 80s to me. You know what I mean? To some degree. And by that, I don't mean like, I don't know, new wave. It just has like the snare sounds '80s to me on the drum kit. You know what I mean? But anyways, I digress. But that's essentially what happened. We had a record deal. We were asked to go into Radio Tokyo in Venice Beach, and we recorded Bonds of Friendship there.
Yeah, I mean, at least it came out, right? And
Right.
And you got to do a record on Wishing Well Records, and that does have to be strange though, because these are dudes you look up to as heroes, and then still, where you're very, very young, you're doing like semi business with them, and feeling like a little bit of disappointment and like that grayness of life, where like not everyone is a hero or a villain. It's like things get hard.
Right. It's really tough when you're a young man to grapple with those emotions of being disappointed in your idols, right? And it was disappointing. You know, I felt like, to some degree, I felt like it was a business transaction for them. You know, I really don't think it was. It was just like they were college kids, and they were doing their own thing, and you know, they were evolving as artists. You know, for lack of a worse cliche, but that's what was happening to them. They were expanding themselves as artists, as musicians, you know. And I felt like if we'd done it 2 years earlier, it would have been done quicker. It would have had all the attention I would have expected it to get, and so on and so forth. And you know, the other fact of the matter is that Revelation at the same time had asked us about doing a 7-inch, and we chose to go with Wishing Well because we knew them, and Revelation wasn't anything at the time. It was, I think maybe 1 was out. I don't think 2 was out. I think maybe Revelation 1 was out, or what? Did they even have a release out by them? I don't remember when Rev 1 came out. Anyways, so we made a decision to go with Wishing Well instead of Rev, and then we felt like, whoa, did we make a mistake? Because we thought these are our local heroes. It's right here in Fountain Valley. We're Orange County guys. These guys make T-shirts in their garage by the thousand, it seemed like. And so, like, it seemed like everything we needed was right here in our backyard. Why wouldn't we do it, you know? And as I say all this, you know, we were huge fans of Youth of Today at that time as well. So being asked by Ray to do a 7-inch with them was super flattering.
Yeah, that's got to be the hardest decision ever.
Yeah, you know, and so that's the thing, right? Did we make a wrong decision? I don't know. I really don't care at this point. But is our legacy different? Have we put that that star with an R on it? Maybe.
That is interesting to think about. Like if Insted would have just been a Rev band, because it is part of the coolness of like the Insted legacy is the labels that you do work with, like you know, doing Wishing Well, and then doing Nemesis, and then getting to be on Epitaph, you know, and then doing the discography with Indecision. Like these are all classic labels. So
yeah,
it does add like a texture to the legacy that maybe you wouldn't have had if you were just on Rev from day one. But then again, if you were a Rev band, like, yeah, you would have had that rub too, you know, and been along for the journey.
Yeah, it kind of cuts both ways, right?
Yeah, it's and a huge one.
You have exactly. You have a built-in fan base if you're on Revelation, and some people, you know, like I know when I first started getting into punk and hardcore, I wasn't even thinking about the record label people were on, you know. So I think some people just assumed we were a Rev band too, you know, when they were new to the scene. But to us, this all seemed very natural because, like I said, the shows were super diverse. Everything was really diverse in the beginning. It was very, dare I say, innocent, you know, like playing a show with Agnostic Front and Fang and the Barookers on a bill was not unheard of. You know what I mean? And I can't even think of how many times we played with MDC. You know what I mean? We played with MDC a lot in a lot of different places. And it's like, you guys played with MDC? Yeah, a lot. I loved it. I loved MDC. But anyways, go ahead.
Do you, after the LP finally comes out, is there a spike in popularity? Like,
Oh yeah.
that establishes you?
So yeah, what happens is we go on like a 2.5 month tour, and right after we get the records, and we have a bunch to sell at our shows with shirts and everything else. And we do like a fall tour. I believe we went out in October, and we were out during Thanksgiving because I remember having Thanksgiving in a diner on the road. But anyways, when we got home, we were shocked. We had taken a show. Ron Martinez had put on a show. He was, I think, his production company at the time. He was calling himself like Christcraft or something like that, and he did some local shows, and he would just find places. And this particular place was a Garden Grove VFW hall, and it was Insted, No for an Answer. I think Hard Stance. I forget who all was on there. I don't even remember if Final Conflict was on there or not. But anyways, it was. We were shocked at how many people came out to see us. We were headlining. I do remember that. They shut down the power while we were like 3 songs into our set because the place was just going bananas. Like people stage diving, huge pit. You know, things were just. It wasn't meant. The VFW hall was not meant for what was happening in it. You know, and so the cops came. The power got shut off, and I believe we were playing "Live and Let Live" when they turned the power off, and we played. I kept playing drums, and everybody sang along as if everything was still plugged in, and it was truly one of my favorite moments in the band. And for what I mean, it kind of felt like we were all of a sudden everybody's band. Like this is our scene. This is ours. Not like in an ownership way, but it's like everybody was looking to us for answers. You know, like we became what Uniform Choice was to us. Like all of a sudden people are looking up to us and being influenced by us and hanging on our every word. You know what I mean?
Yeah, and it has to feel like an insane validation too, because I'm assuming if you're doing a 2.5 month U.S. tour, there's a lot of bad shows in there.
Oh man, there was terrible shows, but there were great ones too.
Well, absolutely. Can you talk some of your memories of that first tour?
So, I mean, we really ran our band in a way that professionals run bands, and we didn't know that. That wasn't our objective. Like, oh, what we need to do is make a record, have it come out, tour it, sell more records and shirts, make a shit ton of shirts, and really put our name out there. But that's what we did. The shirts came from a learned experience of us, our personal affinity for shirts from touring bands that came around here, because everybody came through here. When I say here, I mean Orange County, LA, close enough that we could go to shows and buy band shirts. I mean, I remember one year specifically telling my mom to give me $100. I was going to do my back to school shopping at a Fender show. That's where I was going to get all my shirts for the year. And I absolutely did. And most of them were Wishing Well shirts because Uniform Choice was playing the show.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, that's what I did. And my mom was cool with it. She's like, $100 for a year's worth of shirts? Here you go. You know?
Yeah.
So anyways, just going back to your question, we didn't know what to expect. We expected everything to be terrible, and it wasn't. Of course, there were nights where there was, half a dozen people at some poorly promoted Wednesday night show in Middle America. But there was also great shows where we played with good local bands. And I think what helped us too is we were very personable people. Like, we didn't mind talking to people. We were into hardcore, man. We were hardcore kids. And we didn't think we were too cool. We didn't think we were above anybody. We liked all forms of punk and hardcore. And I like to think like the band really lived by the live and let live, choose for yourself motto. You know, like that's truly who we were. Now we definitely took some vegetarian stands and some straight edge stands as the band evolved more into that. But I still think we weren't terrible about shoving it down your throat. We still accepted people for who they were. And I think when people came out and saw us and you know, even if it was by accident because they were going to see their friend's band open or whatever, it just played in our favor. And we just kept doing the same thing over and over. Come home, play a couple local shows while we wrote new material, record a record, hit the road, sell shirts and records, be cool to everybody, come home, do it again. Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely. But on that tour, do you have any memories? Like, do you want to maybe mention like a low light and a highlight?
So for me, the highlight was we basically set up home base at Roger Murray's house, and at the time he was I don't know if he was married to Amy or if they were just you know a couple with their first daughter, but so you've got to imagine like I'm into hardcore. I love Agnostic Front. I you know, and now I'm staying at this dude's house, and he is being so cool and like completely validating us. That's something else I probably need to add to that previous notion too. Like there were some heavy hitters that came out and supported us and said good things about us and wore our shirts at their shows. Roger put us up at his house and let us like run up and down the East Coast and come back to his house and have a place to sleep. You know, he called out sick and hung out with us from work many days over. I think we stayed at his house for about 2 weeks and ran up and down the East Coast, you know? And so for me, that was the best. Just absolutely incredible. And then a low light probably would have been, I think we played in like Wisconsin in some basement and like no one came, but the couple people that came really dug us. And there were people there. It was like a bar that was like, it still allowed all ages shows. And some dude like that played in one of the opening bands was just like, I mean, we're talking like the only way I could describe him is just kind of think G.G. Allen light. But the dude like was so cool to us and loved us. And I think he was just a punk dude that loved punk and like us just accepted everybody for what they were. And so like he passed his baseball hat around. It was like, everybody put some money in here. These guys got to get some gas to go to their next destination, you know?
Yeah.
And, you know, he didn't collect a lot of money, of course, but he did it.
Yeah.
And then he parlayed that into a ride to wherever he needed to go. But
fair enough.
That was probably I say that was a low light, but it's kind of a combination of a low light highlight because it just kind of showed how rad people were.
Yeah. Yeah. You have a good attitude about it, and you know, you get what you give. So
right.
Real quick on the Roger thing, do you think that you made such a good connection? Do you think that's just because, you know, you both are sincere fans of music? Like a lot of people have put out books or they talk on things, and Roger stood out so much to me because it just comes across that he's like a real super fan of the music. Like
he absolutely is. Yeah, that's a good point. You know, I don't think people realize what a huge record collector Roger is. Maybe they're starting to figure that out because I think there's been a couple of blogs posted and stuff like that. But yeah, he's rad, man. That guy knows his shit, and he's just a fucking rad human being. You know, it's one of those things, right? Like, I think I heard you and Big Frank talk about something like this, or touch on it or something. There's like some bands have fans that you don't like, and so then you end up not liking the band. My example is going to be Pennywise. Like, for me, like Pennywise guys, like their fan base is a bunch of like, and listen, this is, I know this is terrible. It sounds terrible, but it's like a bunch of flat bill, motocross riding, big white sunglass having dudes. Like
Sure.
that was their fan base to me, and it turned me off to the band. I actually think the band's great, but I dislike their fan base so much that it makes me not want any affiliation with anyone.
Sure. Yeah. I mean,
That sounds terrible.
no. I think you're saying what everyone thinks. I mean, you know what the fan base is, but those first couple records are undeniable. I love
Absolutely.
I love them.
Well, and we didn't know anything about them, and I'll give you a quick little sidebar here. They sent in their demo while we were recording what we believe. Was it a demo or a 7-inch? I don't know. They sent something into Epitaph while we were recording what we believe. And so Brett comes to us one day in the studio and says, "Hey, I just got this. Will you guys listen to it and tell me what you think?" And so he puts it on, and we sit there and listen to it. And we're like, "Yeah, man, this sounds a little bit like us and a little bit like Bad Religion. Like, this is really cool." He's like, "You guys think I should sign it?" We're like, "Yeah, it's pretty fucking cool," And that was that, And the next thing I know, Gavin's doing the iconic Pennywise logo on their album, their first Epitaph album.
Yeah.
Like he went from making our album cover for Epitaph to theirs,
Yeah.
And that's how it happened, man.
That's so cool. Yeah.
I'm not saying we're responsible for it, but we were definitely asked our opinion.
Yeah, and you were there. You were there.
Yeah.
Yes.
Exactly.
So cool. Now, I think the best Insted is the 7-inch. The Will Make the Difference. Comes out in 1989, Nemesis. 6-song 7-inch where every fucking song is a banger. There's not a lot of records like that, I mean, unless you want to talk Minor Threat and like the greatest stuff,
Right.
How does this come about?
That.
How does this come about? And are you songwriting? Who's songwriting? And what's your approach for doing a 7-inch after doing an LP?
Okay, so I think that it's clear to most people that have an ear for music that the songwriting style changed a little bit from Bonds of Friendship to that 7-inch. A lot of that has to do with the fact that the McLaughlin brothers and Tony Garcia were no longer in Insted. When we made Bonds of Friendship, those guys were in the band. Now it's me, Kevin, Bear, and Rich, and we are swimming in the hardcore scene, and we are fully. I don't think you could be more immersed than we were, So we had all these influences, especially East Coast, New York hardcore, really influenced us, and I think that comes out a little bit in that 7-inch too. One of the biggest influences on me personally, of like a straight edge genre was Solid 13's that album's one of my favorite albums. I don't think that thing gets the love it deserves. But
it gets lots of love on this pod, let me tell you.
Yeah, I'm sure it does. I forget who I'm talking to here, right? What area code called me. So, honestly, that album was huge for me, and I never got to see them live, but that album means a lot to me. So, where was I going with this? Shoot, what was the question? Sorry.
You were talking about the songwriting for Bonds, or excuse me, for the 7-inch. Will Make a Difference getting better.
So, this is a lot of Rich and I, working together. Bear had definitely had some guitar riffs that were used, but it's mostly, a lot of it is me and Rich. And so the writing dynamic changed, from Bonds to there, and that's essentially what it was. There was conscious efforts to do things, like We'll Make the Difference was very deliberate, very, very deliberate. I remember being, at the time I lived in Tustin, and I remember him and I just being in my room for hours one day, just grinding that song out. So,
yeah, it's a thing that is a common theme on this podcast is I say that there's never too many Unity songs, and that goes directly to that song.
Absolutely.
What they will say is just another Unity song. The more, the better. To us, they are wrong, because if people ask you like what is hardcore, it's very hard to explain, right? Is it just like a little faster punk? But then like in the 90s, like there's legit hardcore bands. Like Earth Crisis is a hardcore band, even though they sound more, sonically it's more metal. So it's like, what is hardcore? And dialing that dialing that in, or trying to dial in what it is, I try to come up with like common things of it has to be this, right? And
Right.
that's so hard to do in something so Big Tent, but
Yeah. You know what? I mean, I don't know. You're making me think about something that I hadn't put a lot of thought into before you just said it. I think hardcore, your example was integrity, right? Has a social consciousness to it, you know? And whereas say like metal is generally, in my opinion, more um, nihilistic, like old punk and fantasy driven. And you don't get a lot of that in hardcore, I don't think.
right. I just think that you got to agree in unity and people, in the room coming together, and then also
Yeah,
anti-racism. And those are
right.
the two big pillars.
Yeah. There's a very communal element to hardcore for sure.
Yeah. And so I just love that song. I love when there's lyrics to a song that you look at it and it looks awesome too. And so for like, that song
Like
just being five,
aesthetically,
yeah, like
yeah,
that song being 5 lines, it's like, how do these guys lay down a classic song and it's 5 fucking lines? Like that's ridiculous,
yeah,
Like it looks like something you want to turn in like impress a teacher, like
right.
it's
Yeah,
a
it's a poem.
yeah, it's like a sonnet. But
Yeah.
yeah,
Got
but
to stick together. Got to stick together.
well,
Like
hey,
there's not much to it.
no, yeah,
You
I
know,
mean, we can go back to Glue. That's perfect.
right?
But then also you do a vegetarian song on the album, which is like so iconic, and the way that you approach it is so visceral. You know,
Yeah.
how do you guys decide to take a stab at that topic, and you really give it like the seriousness that it deserves?
Yeah, and I think that like say like GV took a lighter approach, right, with cats and dogs, right? Um, it was it was definitely deliberate again. Um, we didn't we were trying to ride a line between being overbearing and forthright, and to us, it was very important to try and like straight edge came to me, right? Like it happened at a very important part of my life where I definitely could have went the wrong way, and my life would be much different today. And look, I know plenty of people that were straight edge and aren't anymore, and that's all awesome. I really don't care about straight edge in that way. You know what I mean? I'm a 51-year-old man. I just don't care about straight edge. And if that sounds bad to someone who's bearing the straight edge cross, I'm sorry, but know that by definition, I'm still straight edge. So I guess what I'm saying is that we were trying to do it in a way that was absolutely serious and at the same time simple, and without just being like you know taking say like a Project X or a Slapshot approach to it lyrically. Um, I think that we felt that strongly, but we didn't want to. That's not the way we wanted to present it. We wanted to present it as an option, and yet be serious about it.
Yeah, it's epic. One of the
Thanks,
most
man.
classic vegetarian songs ever. Up there
Thanks.
with, like you said, Cats and Dogs, No More, and this.
Yeah,
Um,
and all that. Like no more. Yeah, and all that shit's happening around us, and we're all friends, and we're all coming from the same place, right? We're absolutely, when you talk about GB Youth of the Day instead, when you talk about GB and Youth of the Day, there's not too many degrees of separation there anyways, but we're all friends. We're all into the same things. We're all, for the most part, in the same, using the same moral compass. You know what I mean?
absolutely. Do you tour? So you were saying before you put out a record, you go tour. Do you tour off the 7-inch as well?
Yeah. So that one was a little bit different in that with the experience we had with Wishing Well and the 12-inch, um, what we were interested in was recording the record and having it come out quick. And we were we were on a timeline. We knew when we wanted to go, and we knew when we could record. And Frank was our guy. Big Frank has a lot to do with the success of Insted, and he'll be humble and downplay it, but he had a lot to do with our success. He's running Zed Records. We bought our demos at Zed Records, so it was natural for us to make our demos, make a lyric sheet, put some stickers in it, put it in a manila envelope, and take it down there and have him put them in there on consignment. And he was, yeah, absolutely, I'll do that. And then I think within the very next morning, he calls us and said, "Hey, I need more demos. I'm out." What? We gave you 20. No, I need more, guys. So then it just was insane. We were just dubbing off demos, like just burning out everybody's dual cassette players, all of our friends, family. Just we were blowing. I don't even know how many demos we made, to be honest with you, but it felt like thousands. It probably was hundreds, but it felt like thousands. So it started there. We established a relationship with him. He's the one who gives us our first big club show. He puts us on I don't know if he put us on there or he recommended that we put on, but he put us on Bad Brains when they were touring Eye Against Eye. And so it was natural for us to reach out to Frank, who had started Nemesis, and say, "Hey, Frank, do you have any interest in doing, our 7-inch?" And I think he was blown away. I think he was like, "What? You guys want me to do your 7-inch?" And we're like, "Yeah, here's what we need. Can you do it?" "Yeah, I can do it. Get in the studio, get it done, and I will get it out within 30 days. And he did exactly what he said he would do. Now, could the artwork have been tightened up a little bit had we not rushed it? Probably, but it didn't matter. It looks like an 80s hardcore 7-inch, But that's how it came to be.
Yeah, because Frank is completely emerged in the scene as well. So he understands, like, your ideas, right? I need this out quick because we're going to tour.
Yeah.
Yeah, so
absolutely.
Cool. Yeah.
We had a mutual understanding of each other's capabilities and trusted each other completely. Frank is one of my favorite people that I ever met through hardcore. A quick little sidebar. I remember bringing him to my house in like 88. And I don't know if you've ever been around Big Frank or seen Big Frank. He was tattooed heavily, dyed black hair, long hair in a ponytail, baseball hat folded like a trucker. Just a big, big man, big, scary looking dude. And I brought him home, and I just remember seeing my dad and his girlfriend at the time just looking at this guy like, "Oh, what did you bring home?" And then Frank, as they're like digesting him, like looking at him and taking it in, he sees the cat, and this different side of Frank comes out, and it just disarms everybody immediately. Because when you look at him, you're judging him, right? That's just human nature, whether we can all pretend that we don't, but we do, right? And him just being like, "Oh, cat, oh my God, I love cats," and just picking up the cat and petting it, like holding it near his face. And it just like completely disarmed the room of my house. Like everybody's like, "All right, this guy's cool."
So
but anyway,
so rad.
Yeah.
Is that tour?
But
go ahead.
I will say there's nothing greater. He came over to my house where I live now when my 18-year-old son was probably about, I want to say, I don't know, he was probably somewhere around 10 years old. I can't remember when he did the Carrie Nation show. I did like a 4-song set with Carrie Nation quite a few years back. And Frank came over to my house and just sat down and started playing video games with my kid. Again, he's walking in my house, and my kids to some degree are used to seeing some characters, right? Just from me being who, their father. I've got some dudes coming around now and again. But him walking in, this large human being, and just being like a teddy bear of a dude, and just being like so loving and like understanding, like, "Oh, let me just sit down and play a video game with your son." And I'm sure maybe it meant something to him as well. Like, I'm going to play a game with Steve's son. This means like this matters to me. You know what I mean? But I just sat back there and like, dude, my heart melted. There's no other way to put it. Like, geez, man, Frank, you're awesome.
Yeah,
You know?
so rad. So rad.
Sorry, I got sidetracked.
No, it's great. That's what it's all about. Is the touring off this? Is it even better, or is it?
Oh, dude, yeah, this is game changer. So, like I said, we get back from the Bonds of Friendship tour, and we're big at home. Like we can draw a lot of people any day of the week. And at this particular time, like we probably can play to 1,000 people. If we book a show on a Wednesday night, if we book a show on a Saturday, a Sunday, we can play a venue that holds about 1,000 people. That's how big hardcore was at that moment. So I'm not about to say that that's what our tour was like, because it wasn't. But the shows were much, much better. We were also out in the summer, which is a better time to tour. Other good bands are out. We're crossing paths. With the other thing too is I don't think people realize that not a lot of bands at that point were touring. Like, it's just not what people did. Like you get like a national act coming over from, say, Europe, people like GBH and Conflict and stuff like that. But American hardcore bands, Youth of Today did it, 7 Seconds did it, we did it, SNFU did it, eventually GB did it, and in this particular summer, us, GB, SNFU, Underdog, we're all like crossing paths constantly. We have some shows together, then we go different ways. We have different people booking tours and whatnot. And it was just, yeah, again, you're just building. Every time I would tell any kid, I hope it's the same these days, that every time you go out, you're making an impact on people. So whether there's 3 people there or 3,000, do what you went there to do and be cool to people, and it'll pay off. We didn't have intentions of getting big. That was never our motivation, ever. But we got very big, especially locally and to a large degree nationally as well. And it just came from hard work, touring, and being cool, and playing any show that came our way. We didn't care who we played with. Like I said, I love SNFU, so no problem there. But we played with the Libido Boys. We played with Pussy Galore. We did some cool shit, man. Shit I'm really glad we did. That was a little off the beaten path. And that was kind of our legacy too. Like you said, we didn't go Revelation. We went Wishing Well. We went Nemesis. We went Epitaph. We were on our own trip.
Yeah, let's talk about how you end up hooking up with Epitaph. Is this because you're playing all the shows at the country club and Bad Religion is playing too, and you get to know the dudes?
Yeah. So, look, Brett Gurwitz is a savvy businessman. He really is. He's many things, but that is one thing he really is. And Bad Religion is, I think, No Control is out, and they're supporting that record. And yeah, we're playing a show at the country club with them, and their merch booth is next to our merch booth, and we're the kings of merch without a doubt. Like, we sold so many shirts every night. It was ridiculous. We always had multiple colorways. We always had multiple designs, and long sleeves, short sleeves, tank tops. Like, we did it up, man. Merch was a big deal, and we learned that from Wishing Well, and we did it shamelessly. So what Brett noticed was a couple of things. The first thing he noticed is how much more merch we were selling than Bad Religion. If I was a betting man, I'd say we were selling shirts 10-1 to them that night, the night that this all goes back to. Then we get out and we play, and I think we were right before them on this show. So, it was probably like a 5-band bill, and we were 4th and they were 5th. And, the headliner. And we were a force to be reckoned with at that time. And I'm not saying that like to toot my own horn. You can look at videos of Insted playing the country club in the late 80s and see, like, there were a lot of people and there were a lot of people that were really into it. and we were really into it, you know. So he takes this all in, right? Doesn't say anything to us at the show except, hey man, what's up? Hey, cool, nice to meet you, whatever, right? Because we didn't really know each other. So the next day, or the following Monday, I think it was a Saturday night. I think Monday, he calls Kevin's house. Somehow I think he gets hold of Big Frank. Big Frank gives him Kevin's number, and he calls Kevin and says, "Hey, would you guys entertain doing a record on Epitaph Records?" And Kevin's like, I never really thought about it. We only have a couple of songs written. And he's like, that's cool. Like, do you have something you can share with me? And he's like, we only really have a boombox version from rehearsals when we, just started putting songs together. He's like, I can figure it out from there. So he's like, all right, let me talk to the guys. And so he, this is a different era. This is landlines, leaving voicemails on cassette recorded voicemails in people's homes. Hey, call me back. It's important. Right. And, he tells us the story I just told you, and it's like, okay, well, let's go down there. And, so we meet him at West Beach, which is where Epitaph Records was run out of at the time. He basically listens to the song, nods his head, and goes, all right, love it, man. You guys are fucking fast, man. You guys are really fucking fast. And he's like, let's do a record. And we're like, shit. Okay. And he's like, he's like literally looking at a calendar on the wall, and there's a bunch of stuff written on it. And he's like, how about 2 weeks from today? And we're like, whoa. So we've got those are the 2 or 3 songs we have. Like, that's all we've got. Right. And, he's like, okay, 6 weeks. And, again, as much as we've done, we're still semi-intimidated by him, and he's being super cool and super gracious, but we're still just like, we don't have the internal fortitude to say, hey, you know what? Like, 6 weeks probably isn't enough for us to write a full album. We just go, okay. And, and we do it, and I think that comes out a little bit in the record. And I took some shit online recently. I forget. I found some old negatives of a photo shoot that was taken for What We Believe of us in our van and around our van. And, I know what it was. 856, what's his name? Sonny. He had redone an old video that Joe Nelson had taken of us. And, it came out really good. It was a spanky show. And he basically wrote an article, like a short paragraph when he posted it saying, hey, I really feel like Insted doesn't get the due they deserve, blah, 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 and whatever. Right. And so I kind of, what I did is I did a copy and paste and reposted it on my Facebook page and just said, I don't really think about this much, until somebody says something, but since he brought it up, one thing I wish we had done is taken more time and really refined What We Believe. I think we would have made an incredible record had we spent a little bit more time on it. And, oh man, I got a lot of backlash for that. Like, what are you talking about? It's the greatest record ever. Because there's like, you love the 7-inch, right?
Yeah, I have everything. Yeah.
Yeah, but there's like 3 camps. There's the Bonds of Friendship people. There's the What We Believe people, and there's the We'll Make the Difference people. And like, they'll all claim that this one's the greatest because, right? So anyways, it's just, I took some backlash on it, but I will tell you flatly, just like I was explaining, in that long-winded story, that I wish we had taken some more time, and I think we would have made a really, really incredible record. I think we shortchanged ourselves on some lyrics. Maybe some songs were a little longer than they should have been, trying to fill time, for example. But nonetheless, it is what it is. That's our legacy,
Well, how do you rank them if you're going to rank them 1, 2, 3? First being best.
Ooh, as a fan of hardcore, I'm gonna go. We'll Make the Difference, and it's going to be a little controversial. I'm going to go Bonds of Friendship, especially if it was recorded better, and then What We Believe. And I do it in that order. I'm not even gonna get into why I do it in that order, but that's my order.
I think that's fair.
All right.
Yeah, I would go 7-inch, then What We Believe, and then Bonds of Friendship. But
I could see that easily.
yeah, I mean, What We Believe, it's got From the Start on it. That might be the best Insted song.
Thanks, man.
I absolutely love that song. You guys didn't play it in the reunions, but
What do you like about it?
I think lyrically it's fucking perfect. Like to write a nostalgic song like in the moment is heavy, and I think you do it well. Like it sums up the band really nicely, you know. And
man, I'm going to give you credit, man. You really read into the stuff well. We were. And go ahead and finish your thought, and I'll jump in. Go ahead.
Well, I just think it has you wax it perfectly as Instead. Like I'm not condemning those who choose metal riffs or write lyrics that don't make any sense. It's like you're saying we do what we do, but like I'm not against you, and
right,
and that's kind of like kind of what you've brushed on in this pod is, you know, you're going to these places, and the reason why you get along with everyone is because you're fans of music and you're not judging people. You know, so
no, not at all.
For you guys to be able to sum it up in a song, and this is late in the Insted career, but in your life, you're still really young, obviously.
Yeah.
You know, I think
it's 1990, so yeah, I'm maybe 20.
Exactly. So for you guys to be able to like sum something up so nicely, I don't know. It's just it blows my mind how creative we are when we're young. And it's nice to see. It's nice to see these examples, and that's just one of them, I think.
Yeah, cool, man. I appreciate that. That's really well said. I think a couple of things, but exactly what you said, right? And I think we knew that it was coming to an end for us. None of us were saying it out loud to each other. Kevin was getting married. His attention was waning. And we knew it. That was part of the struggle of What We Believe. There's no secret there. He caused us some extra work by being late with deadlines and things like that. And there's no ill will on it. It was what it was. He was newly in love and getting married, and it affected his output, you know. And he wasn't as motivated about it Insted as he was, or hardcore for that matter. And then to your point, like there was a lot of schism in the scene, you know, like Youth of Today and Slapshot had a schism, you know, there was just all these beefs. And that's one I can name in particular where we just didn't choose sides, man. Both bands were friends of ours, and they were quite different approaches to straight edge, for example, you know, and, we weren't choosing sides, man. It wasn't our beef. And I think both sides struggled with that for a minute, and then they were just like, they're the fucking Insted guys, you know, like these guys are just cool dudes, you know. Of course they're not taking a side. There's no side that needs to be taken. So, yeah, you know, like, and we knew like bands like Strife were coming up, and you know, Judge and that heavier like chug straight edge was coming. And it was going to steamroll us. We could feel it, you know, and we weren't interested in going that route. Now, as I say that as a grown man, it sounds kind of chicken shit to me, right? Like, just do what you do shamelessly, just do it. But I think at that moment with, you know, where Kevin's head was at, and we were just feeling like, well, there's no place to go from here. Really for us. So if we're not 100% committed, let's call it a day, man. Let's go out, and we're not hating each other. Everything's cool, you know. And that's essentially what happened. We had booked a tour. One thing I'll give Epitaph credit for too, Brett specifically, is that like they wanted us to go to Europe and support the record. You know, like you need to go to Europe. And so we were in the process of booking that tour, and Desert Storm broke out. And then it's like, okay, well, we can't fly. It was recommended in the beginning of that, if my memory serves me correct, not to fly, right? especially with a bunch of electronics and blah, blah, blah. So we had already like taken time off work and planned things around school and whatnot. And so we just parlayed that into like a late spring tour in 91. And then we got home and did a couple rehearsals and we're like, hey, you know what, man, this is just kind of what I said to you. We recognized that we weren't 100% committed. And when I say that, it really wasn't all of us, but we looked at us, we were truly a collective. We all had equal say in what was happening. Everybody's opinion mattered in what we did. And there were some disagreements on things, you know, as far as like what we decided to do, whether it was shirt colorways or how many shirts to make or, you know, what record label to go with. We didn't always 100% agree on that, but there was always a good conversation, a healthy conversation about things. And we just all basically came to the conclusion that we were done. As a band, we were done. And so then we made the conscious decision to say, okay, we can go out big and we can do some huge show and like bring in some big bangers, you know, 7 Seconds, Gorilla Biscuits, whoever, you know, I don't even remember who we were thinking about at the time. But then we were like, you know what? We don't need that. Like, let's just go and play someplace too small for us and not tell anybody. Don't tell your friends. Don't tell anybody. And so we didn't. We booked the show at Spanky's, which was way too small for us at that point in our career. And we got on stage and announced it was our last show. And I literally remember seeing people weeping in the audience. And I remember being choked up, listening to Kevin talk, you know, like, wow, this is it, man. But anyways.
What are your other memories from that show?
Oh, man, that show was unreal. There were people just crawling on the walls, sweat dripping off the ceiling, people crying, everybody singing along. Everybody was on, like, you know, they way oversold the place. There were people outside. There were so many people on stage that we kept, like, I remember Bear and Rich just kept getting knocked into my drum set. I think I got hit with a cymbal falling over on me, and it was all good. Like, it was nothing bad. It was all good, man. But it's weird, you know, like it was so surreal. It was like I was watching Insted from the outside play, because I took so much time as I was playing drums to just look around at the faces and see, like, it was a weird range of emotions I was seeing from people super psyched and super into it, to people super sad and crying and like literally like shaking their head at me like, why are you guys doing this, you know? To realizing, you know, like, this is the last time I'm going to be playing with these guys, you know? So it's just this weird wide range of emotions. Every song mattered. Everybody sang along to every song. We had to keep trying to back people up off the stage, which was fine. But it was truly a high point of my life.
Yeah, that's super rad. Moving on, a cool little I don't know, notch on the bedpost, whatever you want to say.
Sure.
Is you guys got bootlegged by Lost and Found in 1988 or 1998?
Yeah.
That's just kind of probably shitty at the time, but cool now.
You know, I never really cared about that stuff. We didn't make a lot of money selling records. No one did. You know, we made money selling shirts and playing shows. And so, you know, I just never got too fired up about that kind of stuff, personally. And I don't really think anybody in Insted did either.
Yeah, they're interesting for us people that got into hardcore in the 90s, though, because, you know, you talk about Stalag 13 in Control. I mean, that's how I was able to hear that record, you know, they bootlegged it because Upstart had been gone for a long time and Dr. Strange didn't put out until the 2000s. So,
right.
So, I mean, it serves a purpose. You you do MMA 18 or A18 in
Yeah.
1998.
Yep.
Just what are your thoughts on doing this band and your memories of it?
So, Mike Hartsfield calls me, gets hold of me somewhere out of the blue. I hadn't talked to him in a long time. After Insted, I did some indie rock, college rock, whatever you want to call it, bands. And I always kept an ear to hardcore. I never went away from it, but I was always into all kinds of music, like I told you at the beginning of the podcast. And he had got a hold of me, and I think the way he sold it to me, because I feel I might be wrong, because he's hit me up so many times since I'm 18 to do different things. Mike's notorious and relentless, and I love him. He basically said, "Hey, me and Isaac have these couple of songs. Would you? We don't know anybody that's your age, our age, that's straight edge anymore, and it's important to us that this is a straight edge band." And so I don't know if I don't think he had anything to show me. He didn't, because I recorded the demo, and but they did have 2 songs, and they were good. And I said, "All right, cool. Let's do it. Like, we'll just do a 7-inch or whatever." The problem with me is that I'm all in. Like, I work. Like, I don't know any other way to be in a band than to just be like, "Oh, we're doing this. Let's go." And so quickly, what happened was I hesitate to say this, but I almost took over. Like, I was like, "Oh, I started writing all kinds. I got motivated. I started writing all kinds of songs. I could play guitar well enough to write songs, and so I would bring them riffs and be like, "What do you think of this?" And they're like, "Fuck, this is awesome," And so I basically wrote. I think of the first album, I wrote over half of it. The second album, what was that album called?
I don't have it in
Forever
front of
After
me.
Nothing.
I don't have it in front of me, but Mike did say that you wrote most of the second album, I believe.
Yeah, I think I wrote like 90% of it. And I don't know how people feel about him. M18. I don't think people cared much. But I did enjoy it for the most part, and then I didn't. And when I didn't, I was done. And I basically I had a hard time because I worked really hard and really fast. And this is no offense to any of those guys, but at the same time, I can't apologize for my work ethic. I was like, "Let's go, let's go, let's go." Like, and I think the thing they always make fun of me for is I said, if you want to act like amateurs, you'll get treated like amateurs. And it sounds shitty, but I said it in a funny way. It's not what you say, how you say it, right? And I delivered that message in a serious but kind way, and I just kind of viewed them as lovable dipshits to some degree, and I mean, absolutely, I've got nothing but love in my heart for those guys. I don't mean that in a derogatory way, but we're just in different places in the way we work in bands.
That makes sense. It's either 03 or 04 you get Insted back together. What goes into this?
So Dave Mandel approaches us out of nowhere about the possibility of doing a complete Insted discography. And so, we kick it around for a little while. And Dave is very good at motivating you. I don't even know if he realizes what a gift he has for it. But, as you're kind of talking through things and trying to talk yourself out of doing things, he's real good at talking you into things, And so it was like we had wrote another 3 songs before Insted broke up, right? And so we were talking about, okay, well, let's do it in reverse chronological order. All these different ideas everywhere. And it was like, yeah, no, if you guys can find that old cassette of the 3 songs you wrote, why don't you guys learn it and go into the studio with Paul Miner, and we'll put those on there, unfinished instead. That'll even give it more merit, more credibility, make it a little more interesting to people. And so, then we were just like, all right, let's do it, and so we started working on this discography, pulling together old photos, and you start getting very nostalgic about everything, right? Wow, man, we got along so good. We left, we parted on good terms. There's absolutely zero animosity between us. There was no malice at the time, and we're in there and we're working, and everybody, like Paul Miner and him, are just like, this is fucking rad, guys. You guys should do some shows. And we're like, get the fuck out of here. We're not doing shows. And this is funny, in 2004, right? 16 years ago, we're like, we're old men. No way, but eventually, I don't remember who said what, but this is what was thrown out there. If CBGBs will book an Insted show, then we will do reunion shows. And that was that. CBGBs was like, yeah, we would love to do an Insted show. And then we were kind of like, we're men of our words. We're like, okay, I guess we're doing a reunion show on the East Coast. And so we didn't think anything of it. We started getting ready for it. And, man, it was just like getting on a bike, like you just don't forget. And all those, using an athletic term, all those twitch muscles start just firing where they're supposed to, transitions. It was like we never quit playing, like quickly. And so that's mind blowing. You're like, wow, we can do this. And so we booked those 3 shows. It was Jersey, CBGB's, and I think it was a Rhode Island show. And they were all great. They were super fun. And the other thing we did, except for maybe the CBGB shows, I don't remember. I know we had Kill Your Idols open as one of the bands, but generally speaking, did we have the First Step on that show? I don't remember. Anyways, it was as it was always for Insted. It was important to us to have complete control over who we put on the bill, because we wanted to give. It was always important to us to have up and coming bands, give them a chance, like we got a chance. We always felt it necessary to do what was done to us, and then there started to be some. I don't want to say backlash, but I don't know what to call it. But people were bummed out that we weren't doing California shows. Like, hey man, what the fuck? You guys are a California band. What do you mean you're not doing California shows? And we were just like, nobody gives a shit about us. Like, we're long gone. Like, we're an afterthought. And then Golden Voice comes calling, and they're like, hey, we blood's in the water. Let's do this. And we're like, shit, man. So then we get the big idea. Hey, let's do something rad. Let's get Youth of Today. Let's do Youth of Today, 7 Seconds Instead. And let's do the Glass House in Pomona. And so 7 Seconds has a conflict. They can't do it when we want to do it. And Youth of Today wants to do something even bigger and crazier than what we're interested in doing. And it becomes clear to us that it's about more than just putting on a cool reunion show. I think that you probably know, because you seem well connected and well informed, that we weren't doing it for money. We absolutely were not doing it for money. And no disrespect to bands who do it for money, because everybody should get paid. People don't realize how much money you spend being in a band, with rehearsals and vans breaking down and equipment getting stolen and all that stuff, right? So I have no qualms with people getting paid. But for us, we just wanted to do a $10 show, and we wanted it to be authentic. It was really important to us that it was as we remembered it. And in dealing with Youth of Today, it was clear that they wanted to do, turn it into a more of a money thing. And so we were like, okay, never mind. And then it just turned out where we decided it was better to do back-to-back nights at the Showcase Theater. And I'm really glad we decided to do it that way. and put some young and up and comers on the bill, and had a great time.
Yeah, those shows were awesome. I had a great time, and then also I saw you play in Ventura.
Did you go to those?
Yeah, I went to them. I went at least one night because I saw you at Showcase,
All right.
and then you played Ventura as well.
Ventura. Okay, that was in that small club. That feels like that wasn't a very good turnout at that show.
No, it wasn't, but the show was great.
Yeah, thanks. And we played with a rad band too. Who played with us at that?
Betrayed played, and then also the greatest band on earth, Retaliate, my band.
Nice.
But
yeah. There we go. Yeah. No, and it was a small turnout, but again, that felt authentic, and I don't think we played any less hard because it wasn't a packed Showcase theater show or CBGBs. We played exactly the same way we would have played, and I hope you can attest to that, seeing us in both environments.
Absolutely. I mean, I've never heard anyone say bad things about Insted. Just, I don't know. Everything about it, I love. So you're talking to the wrong guy if we're looking for criticism. But yeah,
no, I appreciate that. Yeah, no, it's weird, because I have this thing where it seems like it's not cool to be in a posse band or be affiliated with a posse band like Insted was, and to be totally transparent, like that's just the band I was in. Like I was really into Infest and Negative Approach, and like if I had my rathers, I would have rather played in some angry hardcore band. I don't want to make it seem like I'm totally happy with what I did instead, and I have no regret. But I think there's a weird stigma attached to it to some degree, and maybe I'm wrong, but that's what it feels like sometimes.
Yeah, I mean there is a little bit of thoughts on like posse bands like that, but I think that when you dial into the classic Insted stuff, you see that there's more to it. Like lyrically,
right.
It gets really good.
Thanks, man.
Plus, I mean, you're a living testament to the greatest piece of hardcore, which is like still staying friends, right?
Yeah.
I mean, and that's a huge piece of it. Like you guys didn't hate each other. You guys did a band for the right reason. You even did reunions for the right reason. You're still friends. And then we can move on to the last thing here to talk about, which is Alligators, which is basically Insted plus Roger from Agnostic Front on vocals.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I remember, Mandel did it, and remember seeing it, and I was just like, oh my God, it's Insted with Roger singing. Like, this is going to be the greatest thing ever. And it was. I mean, for a side project band, this is about as good as it gets. And I apologize, if you think it's more than a side project, but it is, like, at least for Roger, it is. At least for Roger, absolutely. It was, right?
So, absolutely. It absolutely is. We've never played live.
Okay, there you go. Yeah, so how do you put this band together, and how do you feel about those first 2 7-inches?
So, Rich is a funny dude. I've been playing music with Rich my whole life. In indie rock bands and hardcore bands. The only band he wasn't in with me, or 2 bands he wasn't in with me, were Carrie Nation and Amendment 18. And but he's a funny dude. Like, he just calls me one day and says, "All right," and he probably said it just like this: "All right, fucko, me, you, and Roger are doing a record." And then Bear was brought into the fold to play guitar on it, but basically it was me, you, and Roger making a record finally. And I'm like, okay. And so essentially what happened is we went to a rehearsal studio, and he taught me songs. And as he was teaching me the songs, Paul Miner was setting up some stuff on his laptop in a rehearsal studio and recorded the first 7-inch as I was learning them. And the thought process there was we wanted to capture it as I was learning it, so it wasn't over tight, so it sounded like legitimate old school hardcore that wasn't overproduced or overly tight. Not that there's anything wrong with those things, it's just not what we wanted, so that's how the first 7-inch came to be. And essentially it got repeated on the second 7-inch, but we went to Paul's studio and did it there. I learned songs in the studio there. They hit record, we captured it, and that was it, man. And Rich is really the brainchild behind 98% of it. lyrics. He's telling Roger, "Here's your lyrics," and he literally told Roger, "I don't want this sounding like any of this new bullshit agnostic front voice thing you're doing. Like I want victim in pain, Roger. That's who's singing this." And like if he started to drift off that path, man, Rich was on him. No, no, no. You know, right, wrong, or indifferent. That's just the way it was approached. You know, yeah, I loved it. It's a good time, and we're getting ready to do some more stuff. Actually, it's strange that you, or coincidental that you contacted me about doing this podcast and asked me about this, because in a couple of weeks I'll be learning some new Alligator songs.
Yeah, so cool. And it will have happened by the time this came out, because we're a few weeks out from this airing. Not to peel the curtain back for everyone too much, but and
Right.
That's funny that you dial in on Roger's voice though a little bit, just because, man, he's someone where I've enjoyed the whole ride. I love like every single era, including all the new stuff, and they are still something special live.
You know, those guys, sick of it all. They are professional bands. They are professional hardcore bands, and I'm not saying that with anything but admiration. Those guys know what they're doing. They know how to do it, and they deliver every fucking time.
Yeah. I mean, they're the perfect like forebearers for it, because they take the art and like do it in such a way like professional. That is a proper term to use, although like that word could be like misstrued, I guess.
Yeah,
but
absolutely.
No, I mean they are, because I've seen both those bands in small clubs in the last couple of years, and when I say small, like I saw Sick of It All last year, you know, at a 150 cap, and like these are dudes that they're great in front of 5,000 or that 150. Yeah. You know, it's just it's amazing. So, but yeah, I guess I'm just a fan. And we should say you can still get all that Alligator stuff. Came out in Indecision. I think you can order it there still. B9 put it out in 2012. That's just a re-release, I believe.
Yeah, I think what they did is they took, and I have to apologize because I sound like an asshole, but I think it's just both 7 inches on a 12-inch. Maybe.
Right, because Indecision did the 2 7-inches, put it on CD. B9 just does the vinyl.
That's correct.
Yeah, and then Indecision, they did the Insted discography in 2002, like we had mentioned, but it came out on vinyl in 2016, and it's epic, so everyone should order that, indecisionrecords.com. Because, man, that's a nice piece of art. Have you held that in your hand before?
What's that?
The Insted discography on vinyl?
Oh, yeah, man. I love that thing. I'm really happy with the way that turned out.
Yeah, so epic. Double LP, and everyone should get that. So,
man, I feel like there's a bazillion different colors of vinyl available, too. I'm not 100% certain on what's still available, but...
Yeah, well, go to indecisionrecords.com and figure it out. But yeah, I mean, Dave's a record collector, so he's going to have fun with it.
Right. He's going to do it right.
That's right. So, Steve, thanks so much for being generous with your time. I appreciate it.
Absolutely, man. I appreciate the fact that you have any interest in something, you know, anything that I've done. I'm always happy to talk about it as best I can, you know. One thing that I think comes out with Insted is sometimes it almost seems boring to me because we got along and things went well, you know.
Yeah, but, you don't have the whole like behind the music story where
right, exactly.
Know, drug addiction, then break up, and then you get back together 20 years later.
Yeah, I don't know if you've ever seen like the short Insted documentary. I think somebody uploaded it to YouTube, but it like if I watch like say even like the Slapshot documentary, man, that thing like bums me out, and you know it's like a ride through emotions. Where ours is just like the conversation we just had, you know, like it's not. There's no drama in it. It's just yeah, we did this and we did that, and we all got along cool, and then we broke up, and then we did some reunion shows, and yeah, here we are. Awesome.
Yeah, still buddies. Yeah, we just played music. Yeah, and the shows got better.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, that's wild. So, Steve, do you feel like you've been well represented?
In
this interview, you feel okay about it?
Oh yeah, dude. Yeah, for sure. Yeah, the only thing you didn't ask me about that I thought I'd get asked about, and I'm not complaining, was Carrie Nation.
Yeah, I fucked up on that. I did do.
I don't know about that.
Well, I did a fair amount of talk on Carrie Nation on the Big Frank pod.
True, fair enough.
Is there anything you want to brush on that?
You know, on Big Frank's, I think he made one mistake. I think we introduced him to Vision. Introduced him to Vision for Nemesis.
Oh.
We went and did a spring tour with them. This is a rad Insted story. I don't even know how we got set up, but basically we got the big idea to fly to the East Coast during spring break and play, rattle off like 10 shows over spring break. And we chose the East Coast because you can cover so much ground there and play so many big cities, right? Because they're all close enough in proximity, right? So somehow we got hooked up with Vision, and it was literally Kevin calling Dave, and Dave being Dave was like, "Yeah, all right, man, yeah, cool, man, let's do this." Like he was gung ho. And my favorite Insted tour, for sure, is that spring tour with Vision, and we became great friends. It's tragic, that Dave passed away, but I still keep up with those guys, on Facebook, and not even superficially, like we message each other every now and again, and it's cool, man. Like there's just been some bonds forged over, 3 decades plus that have, to this day are still bearing fruit, and it blows my mind. But yeah, so that's the only thing. Just going back to specifically what you asked, that would be the only thing I would question Big Frank on. I don't want to question Big Frank on anything, to be honest with you, but I think he might have been I think he said Kane from Cargo is the one who put him in touch with him, but I think we actually did. Go ahead.
No, I'm just glad it got straightened out on the 185 Mile South podcast. So everyone's allowed to be wrong
Frank
once.
Know what I said. I'm going to text him as soon as I get off here and be like, "Look, jerk, I listened to your interview today, and here's the many places you were wrong."
That's right.
And but yeah, I don't remember. He was talking about Insted, and Carrie Nation being a side project. I think this came across in Frank's interview, and I didn't hang on every word. I was working while I was listening to it, and so people were interrupting me, and I'm working on stupid spreadsheets and whatnot. But I think he basically said, no, it was always intended to be a side project. And I think that was true for everybody but Frank. Frank really wanted to do an album. He wanted to do more with it than like I was so busy with Insted, I barely had time to do it. But as I say this, I loved Carrie Nation. I absolutely loved it. Again, more like where I was coming from personally, a little darker, a little angrier, so that it kind of stroked that bone for me, you know what I mean? And it's unfortunate that I think that shocking Dan O'Mahony's ego got in his way, and I'm not afraid to say that. Dan's got a big ego. He knows he's got a big ego. And I think that really was the end of the band, his ego. Now, you could argue that maybe Frank played into that too. But you're talking about guys that are coming from very successful bands playing in a band together, right? But when those two behemoths almost come to blows on a stage at Spanky's Cafe, I'm like, I'm done. I don't need this. I have a good time playing music. This is not fun. Breaking you two idiots up over what? Stupid shit. So, anyways, it's a shame. Carrie Nation had a bunch of good songs written that I honestly felt when I left the band, because I left on the spot that night. I just assumed they'd pick up another drummer and carry on, but they didn't. And I think that's a shame, because I think there was roughly 10 to 12 other songs written that were really, really good, better than the 7-inch probably.
Well, that's a bummer, because that could have been a really good LP.
Yeah,
the songs are epic on the 7-inch, and I think that the style almost lends itself better to an LP.
Yeah, I agree with you 100%. 100%. There was yeah, like I said, some darker elements, some longer intros, just some, like, there was this, it was menacing almost to me, when I listen to it now. Not that I listen to it, because I don't. If I play it for somebody and I'm hearing it, that's usually how it happens.
Yeah.
It has like a menacing vibe to it to me.
Yeah, there's just a lot there. It's good creative songwriting, especially like for the time. There's like, I don't know, there's build-ups and so forth that it doesn't really, I don't know, on an LP it just could have even worked better, I think. I agree with you. I understand what you're saying. Yeah. Hard to put it out there, but yeah. Well, I really appreciate your time, Steve. And
hey, likewise.
I'm glad you set me straight on the Carrie Nation stuff.
Yeah, I don't want Frank fucking up my legacy, man. I got to get that shit handled. Yeah. I'm literally going to get off the phone with you, and I'm going to text him and be like, "Hey, heads up, corrected you."
I'm going to race you.
Yeah. I'm gonna. We might have to fight. It's okay. He's had heart surgery. I'm feeling good.
Yeah. No, for sure. No, it's all you. You can text him. I'll text him tomorrow.
Right on, man.
All right, Steve. Thanks so much.
Hey, thank you.
All right. Bye-bye.
Be well.